Everybody, hiya! All right, welcome in. I am Pugs, and this has been a while. It's been a while. We haven't spoken in a couple of months. Diddy or Didn't He was a show that I had done every single night. A recap of the Sean Diddy Combs trial that occurred in a New York City courtroom. When was it? It's like May through June. I don't even remember, but we would gather every night and we would go through all of the ups, the downs, the crazy details of what life must be like to be Sean Diddy Combs. He lived a life, boy, and of course he was on trial for some very big charges. Global sex trafficking kingpin is the way that he was framed to most of us. Now, I told you from the very beginning, and whether it was a solo show or one of the shows that we did with our friend Headcrack or James Parker from WBAP Radio in Dallas, I told you from the very beginning that it seemed to me that very shortly, a day or two into the actual trial, it seemed to me that the prosecution had overcharged, and I didn't really see how they were going to be able to paint the victims of Sean Diddy Combs as victims, especially after they started testifying. And it became clear to me and became clear to a lot of other people who were watching very closely that, yeah, these women went through some things, but they weren't necessarily victims in the traditional sense that we think of a victim. I feel that Cassie was a willing participant, and I think that she had skin in the game. Probably a bad metaphor to use, but I think that she was she was with Diddy because Diddy could make her a star, and she was a pop star trying to become one. So I think she put up with certain things because there was some expectation that it would be paid off. Now, this doesn't justify abhorrent behavior on the part of Sean Diddy Combs, but it also doesn't make Cassie a traditional victim in, the way we think of victims of sexual assault or abuse or kidnapping or being sex trafficked, that kind of thing. Jane was another one who got up. Jane was another person who testified against Diddy. She was framed by the prosecution as a victim. Jane did an absolutely terrible job. Jane was unlikable. Jane seemed smug. Jane was currently, while testifying against Diddy as a so-called victim, at least in the way the prosecution would have us believe, Jane was living in a house that Diddy was still paying for. Every month he would make the payment for not just a house. I mean, we're talking about like a shotgun shack somewhere on Long Island. No, she was living in the mansion in a gated community in Southern California that Diddy was flipping the bill for at the very same time that she was saying he victimized me and he did all of circumstantial maybe. Maybe it doesn't tell the entire story, but Jane did not come off well. I'm a compassionate individual. I wanted to hear the testimony of these so-called victims and feel like, yes, let's get this bad guy off the street. But that is simply not how this trial went down. So when he was finally acquitted of the serious charges, the charges that involve sex trafficking, kidnapping, and all those things, acquitted of all of them, I thought that what we were looking at here on this day, the day of the sentencing, October the 3rd, I thought we would be looking at time served. I really did. I thought that the judge was going to say, Sean Diddy, or whatever he calls him, I don't know their relationship, you've been in prison now for well over a year, and you've been convicted of 2 crimes that are essentially you transported prostitutes. That's 2 counts of transporting individuals for the purpose of prostitution. The Mann Act, which is a very troubling law to begin with, which is why they're probably not calling it the Mann Act, but the Mann Act is a very troubling piece of American legal legislation. The Mann Act was originally used to imprison black men for having white girlfriends. So we don't call it that. What he's been charged with is essentially the transportation of people for the purpose of prostitution. Not even women. Remember, the prostitutes in question here were male prostitutes that he would hire to have sex with his girlfriends. The idea here, at least pushed by the prosecution, was that these girlfriends were not into it. And I don't know if I would agree that they weren't into it. And I certainly don't know that I would say that they were into it, but I will leave it at this. They went along with it. They didn't push back. So draw from that what you will. What I did was I thought, here's a guy who was in prison now for 12 months. That's probably more than I would think a first-time offender. Is he a first-time offender? That's interesting. I don't even know what his legal history is. I mean, I know he's been in the news for certain things, but I don't know that he's ever actually been convicted of a crime. So, just trafficking, that's a poor word to use. Just moving from one place to another, a prostitute, doesn't seem to me to be a really serious crime that we need to be putting people in prison for. A slap on the wrist, maybe a Jay Cutler type sentence where you go to jail for a day or two. At any rate, Sean Diddy Combs has been in prison now for well over a year and a half. So today was the sentencing. I was expecting him to walk, but guess what, folks? That is not what happened. Judge Aram Subramanian, mere moments ago, I haven't even had time to listen to all of the pundits discuss what this all means. Judge Aram Subramanian has sentenced Sean Diddy Combs to 50 months in prison. 50 months in prison. Do the math. What is that, 4.5 years? Something like that. 12 months in a year, 24 makes 2, 24 and 24 is 50. That adds like, 2 months, 2 years and 2 months. I don't know. I don't do math. Now we'll talk about what led Judge Aram Subramanian to make that decision. But first, let me run through everything that went on today, because today was a full-on court day. I thought when I woke up this morning that there would just be, they'd come in, the judge would come in, and the judge would go, here's what I'm thinking about a sentence. And that would be it. 90 minutes top. I didn't even think they would need to go to lunch, but they didn't. They took the entire day because the prosecution wanted to get up and speechify, and then we had the defense getting up and speechifying. We had Diddy's kids getting up and speechifying. We had Diddy finally getting up and speechifying. But let me bring you up to speed on what all happened before we found out about the sentencing. Once again, Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced by Judge Aram Subramanian in a Manhattan court to 50 months in prison. Time served? Does he get like a year and a half taken off of that, or a year and 2 months because he's been in prison? I don't know. But here's what went down today. A large portion of today's testimony was by Sean Combs' legal team. 5 of his attorneys spoke today. Let's see. They detailed their client's struggles with mental health. That was a big thing. Diddy's a victim of mental health. They also included claims of his rampant drug addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder. They went with all of them to explain why he beat up his girlfriend, Cassie. And we all saw that video from the Hotel Intercontinental there in Los Angeles from about 10 years ago now. It was mental health, it was drug addiction, and it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Those are 3 things that I think each and every one of us, with the exception of maybe drug addiction, can claim some experience with. They have said repeatedly, Sean's defense team, they've said repeatedly that Mr. Combs should be released to receive treatment rather than suffer within our penal system. 2 days in custody, Your Honor, is like walking dead, Brian Steele, one of Mr. Combs' lawyers, told the judge. I don't know what that means. So that was the basic tenor from the defense. They're like, Judge, he's a sick man. He shouldn't be in prison. But it all started on a weird note today. We need to mention this because I imagine that this pissed off the judge. I don't have to imagine it. I think I did through his own statements. The first thing that I woke up to today was this notion, this idea that Sean Combs had booked speaking engagements in Miami for next week. This was made public this morning. So the judge, he's driving in, probably hears this report on the news. He hears the guy that he is about to sentence is making plans for next week, as if he's a free man, as if he's taking for granted the power of Judge Aram Subramanian in this moment. He, the judge himself, said that that was bullshit. He didn't say that, but he was not happy with the idea that the Diddy team had actually booked appearances. Now, the defense had to explain that to the judge. Judge is like, what the hell is this, you guys? Xavier Donaldson, one of Diddy's attorneys, who we didn't hear a whole lot from during the trial, but today he had a big starring role. Xavier Donaldson, one of his attorneys, spoke on behalf of Sean Combs, took issue with the prosecution's claim that Mr. Combs had arrogantly scheduled speaking engagements in Miami for next week. Of course, the assumption being on Diddy's part that he would be free. So Xavier Donaldson, Diddy's lawyer, when this news was made public and the prosecution had their say, this is wrong, and the honor was like, it is inappropriate. You know, the judge didn't like it either. Donaldson gets up and he says that he didn't arrogantly book these things, assuming that your honor would, sentence him to time served. Instead, he said, contrary to what the government has said, this is Xavier Donaldson, contrary to what the government has said, I am going to say this blatantly. We do need something for him to do if he does get out today. What? You don't say, this is completely taking the judge's power for granted. This is not good. What you should have done is you should have come out and you should have said, and I'm sorry, I don't mean, suggest that they should lie. But what they should say is, we don't know anything about this, Your Honor. This is yet to be confirmed by Mr. Combs' PR company. There are a lot of people out there who are looking to, somehow punish Diddy. He's got a lot of enemies. That's what they should have said. They should have said, we don't know what this is, Your Honor. And you're right. If this was done, this is bad, but it has nothing to do with us. And Mr. Diddy's been in jail. He didn't plan it. These are people working on Mr. Diddy's behalf. That's what they should have said. But instead, they're like, well, Your Honor, if you do decide to let him out, he needs something to do. That is not how that should have been framed. Donaldson went on to say that Combs would fill his time not with speaking engagements, but with teaching engagements for the incarcerated of South Florida. So that was the plan there. Okay, also, one of the things that we learned today before everything got started was the mystery of Gina, or the mystery of victim 3. If you've been following this court case, you may remember that in the beginning there were supposed to be 3 so-called victims of freak-off parties. 3 different girls would come up and they would give witness testimony as to what happened to them. We know about Cassie. Remember, Cassie took the stand. She was all pregnant and beautiful and all that, and very sympathetic figure. Cassie got up and did it. Then we had Jane. Remember, Jane is the one that's living in the house that Diddy is still paying for. Jane, we got Jane. But then the third one was Gina. We were going to be told her name was Gina. That was her AKA. Gina went missing the day before the trial started. I don't know if you go this far back in the trial, but the day before the trial started, the prosecution announced that victim number 3, AKA Gina, was out of pocket. They couldn't find her. They didn't know where she was. She had gone missing. This went on for a couple of weeks before we all just stopped asking questions and decided that Gina was probably not going to testify as previously believed. So what happened to Gina? Well, guess what? Gina wrote a letter to the judge. Gina wrote a letter. The letter was revealed today. Gina, in the letter, explains to Judge Aram Subramanian what exactly happened, and here's what she had to say. Oh, by the way, let's see Gina. We've seen Cassie. We saw Jane. Let's get a look at who Gina is. This is the 3rd participant in Diddy's freak-offs. Of course, Cassie, and of course, nope, that's not it. Of course, Cassie. Here we go. There she is. Look at her. Her real name is Virginia Hyun, and that's her. There she is. That's victim number 3, a.k.a. Gina, known as Virginia Hyun. She's a looker. She looks like she's built for freak-offs, right? Is there any other pictures of her? Let me see. Very attractive. There she is. Very attractive woman. Okay, there you go. So that's who we're talking about. That is the witness who went missing on the eve of the trial. She wrote a letter to Judge Aram Subramanian explaining exactly why she went missing. And now here is what she said. Victim number 3 in this indictment, prosecutors said that she had disappeared and would no longer be called to testify, despite being referred to often throughout the trial as Gina. So even though she didn't sit and give witness testimony on the record, prosecution still used what they claimed she was going to say throughout the course of the trial. So she was referenced, even though she didn't actually get up and say any of these things. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because now in this letter, she is writing to the judge and she is saying, look, judge, here's the reason why I vanished. All right, here's what she had to say. Gina, or Virginia Hyun, has written to the judge. She said that she cooperated fully with prosecutors, and during meetings with prosecutors, she felt pressured to be a victim. Virginia claims she was not a victim. She was a willing participant. The prosecution found out her name and called her and wanted to talk to her, and she talked to the prosecution. She told her side of the story, and during this give and take with the prosecution, she realized that the prosecution was trying to paint her as a victim and somebody that could be used as a weapon against Diddy in trial, and she didn't want to be that because she didn't see herself as a victim. This is another indication of what I've believed the entire time, that the prosecution overcharged this case. Prosecution tried to make careers off of this case. They do it all the time. You get a celebrity, you trump up the charges, probably a bad metaphor, but you build up the charges into something that's going to scream headlines. You're going to be in the newspapers. They're going to want to interview you on Fox, MSNBC, CNN, all of that stuff. And yes, I believe that Maureen Comey, who has since been relieved of her duties with the Southern District of New York, I believe that Maureen Comey was attempting to career build. She wanted to be the person that would put Diddy behind bars for life. She way overestimated the evidence. She way overestimated her abilities, and she way underestimated what a super dream team defense attorney can do. Because I'm telling you, she was embarrassed. Now, Maureen Comey was fired. She was fired like a couple of months later, not necessarily directly related to this case. Probably, who knows in 2025 why these people are let go, but she was let go. She's also, it should be noted, the daughter of James Comey, who is not popular with the current administration that resides in the White House. So whatever the reason is that she was fired, and there was some belief that she might be in the courtroom today. She did not show up. She's not in the gallery. She did not show up. She kept pretty far away from that. Okay, so now back to Gina. Remember, Gina is saying the prosecution, led by Maureen Comey, was trying to paint her as a victim. And as soon as she realized in these meetings that they were trying to force her into being a certain way, she decided, through the advice of her own attorney, that she was going to go get lost. And that's what happened. She tells the judge that she told the prosecution that she wasn't a victim, but that they insisted that she was. Gina said in the letter to Judge Subramanian, "I was not trafficked. I did not engage in prostitution with him or others. That would have been my testimony if they had called me to the stand." All right, that's probably why they didn't look for her too hard once she went missing. They acted, this is the other thing that bothers me, because I believe her. I believe her because I heard what the other so-called victims had to say, and neither of them came across like victims. I mean, look, I am a compassionate individual. I have empathy for strangers. If these were women being trotted out who had spent like a couple of weeks in a box container and a freight boat coming from China, but that's not what this is. These were a bunch of high-end, elitist, beautiful people in the world of show business who were acting in a debauched manner, something that I assume happens all the time. Not victims, willing participants. Sean Diddy Combs, or anybody that's famous. And the president himself says, when you're famous, they let you. Anybody who's famous doesn't need, and certainly somebody who's dangling the prize of stardom like he did with Cassie. Cassie, I'll make you a star. I mean, that's what she fell in love with. That's why she was there. She was in it for something. And the same with Jane. Jane was in it for something. Jane's living in a mansion still that Diddy and Diddy.com or Diddy Corp, Diddy Worldwide, still paying her rent or her leash. These are not victims in the traditional sense. And that is what Gina told the judge today. She told the judge that the prosecution was trying to misrepresent her experience. She was willing to talk about it, but she did not consider herself in any way, shape, or form a victim. She also told the judge that she was fully prepared to testify, but was informed by her lawyer that she would not be called to take the stand. She also maintains that Diddy never once reached out to her through the process. Now, that's important, because when she disappeared, it was presented by the prosecution, who looks more and more duplicitous as these details come out. The prosecution tried to suggest, without saying as much, but I know I took it away from it. I know what I took from it. Prosecution tried to suggest that maybe Diddy had gotten to Gina and that she was paid off to go missing, to go spend a couple of months in the south of France or something. That was the idea. That's what we were all thinking. Did they get to Gina? Well, now Gina in this letter is saying, no, they didn't get to me. And the prosecution knew that I wasn't going to testify because they weren't going to call me. She's like, I would have testified. I would have said everything that I just said to you, Judge, in this letter. But they knew that that's what I was going to say. So they decided not to call me. And they told my lawyer that they were not going to call me. And then lo and behold, on the eve of the trial, they're clutching their pearls and acting like Diddy is up to something because we're not going to have a victim. They knew the whole damn time. Do I believe that? That's what we're being asked. Do we believe that the prosecution knew the whole damn time when they were pretending like they couldn't find victim 3? Do we believe that they were lying? Yes, I do. I do believe that they were lying, or at least misrepresenting. Why? Because they thought it would be believable in the moment, the start of the trial, to have the trial begin under the shadow of the notion that maybe Diddy is this dark, all-powerful creature who can make witnesses disappear, like a crime boss. But no. Okay, so there you go. So we found all this out this morning. So the mystery of Gina has been solved. The whole day started out with the defense making a couple of speeches and speechifying. Combs' defense tried to eliminate as many enhancements as possible. Enhancements are these things that will cause extra time in the judge's sentence. They tried to eliminate enhancements while government prosecutors were trying to add new enhancements by raising objections. The judge has overruled objections from both parties, but notably he overruled Combs' request to not consider conduct that was part of the charge against him for alleged sex trafficking. Okay, so let me explain what this is. So he was not convicted. He was acquitted of all the really heavy charges. And a lot of the most damning evidence that we saw in the trial are directly related to the charges that he was acquitted of. The video of him beating up Cassie and all that kind of stuff. The defense got up today and said, look, Judge, we just want to make sure that while you're considering this sentence, you are not going to factor in any of the horrible information that we have, because that information is tied to something that he was acquitted for. You cannot let that affect your sentencing. And the judge said, go kick rocks. The judge basically said, he didn't say that. Judge basically said, yeah, no, that's not a thing. Well, he's a violent guy. We know he's a violent guy. You guys, throughout the course of this trial, you leaned into admitting that he brutalized women. You never pushed back on the idea that he beat the snot out of Cassie. You saw the video. You said, yeah, Your Honor, he did. He beats up women. And you rested on the notion that he was not charged with beating up women. That's why the defense was so cavalier and comfortable about admitting that he beats up women, because he was not being charged with that. Well, now here we are at sentencing, and the judge is saying, yeah, you guys admitted that he beats up women. So now I got to consider that. Now I got to know that, okay, well, here's what we know. We know he beats up women. You thought you were being sly, defense, but it's come back and it has bit you in the ass, because I am telling you, that is the reason that Diddy got 50 months. He got 50 months because the prosecution was so cavalier, so cute, so cheeky about not being afraid to talk about the video and not being afraid to talk, because they would then in closed doors go, let them judge us. You're not being charged with that. Well, here in sentencing, the judge is considering all of these things. All right, what else do we have? What did the prosecution get into? Christy Slavic, because Maureen Comey wasn't around. She's been fired. Christy Slavic, who was kind of the second in command, she took the lead today. She said that today is about accountability and justice. The defense has tried to paint Combs' conviction on those 2 Mann Act charges, transporting a prostitute. The defense has tried to paint Combs' conviction as just a side effect of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle, but it's more than that. Slavic said, this isn't just a case about sex. It's a case about real victims who suffered real harm at the hands of the defendant, which again is wild to me, because they're saying this about victims who we saw testify, and none of them really see themselves as victims. I should fix that. I think Cassie probably put herself out there as a victim. I think that Jane probably did as well. Although their case that they presented did not make us, the viewer, think that they were victims. And then you got victim number 3, Gina, saying, I was absolutely not a victim. This isn't just a case about sex. It's a case about real victims who suffered real harm at the hands of the defendant. Slavic reiterates that the government recommends a sentence of 135 months. That's about 11 years. That's what the prosecution was asking for. The defense was asking for, so the prosecution wanted 11 years. And the defense was like 14 months, which is interesting because it seems like in the pro Diddy circles, there was real hope that Diddy would walk out of court today, that it would be a time served type situation because he's already spent 12 months in prison. And honestly, 2 counts of moving a prostitute from New York to Florida, is that honestly worth more than a year in jail? I don't think so. So most people thought that he would walk, and I count myself. Last night when I went to bed, I thought he would walk today. Woke up this morning, saw a whole bunch of different things, and I knew pretty much from about midday today that this was apparently not going to be he's going to be appearing in Miami next week. I knew that wasn't going to happen. Judge Subramanian said as much. You know, he gave you some tells. Anyway, we'll find out about that. Okay, let's do that now. Judge Subramanian early on today suggested that Diddy's sentence could be 6 to 7 years. He ended up giving him about 4.5, I think is how that works out. 4.42, I don't know, whatever. But early this morning, he basically telegraphed that Diddy was not walking out of prison today. Judge Subramanian said earlier today that advisory guidelines for sentencing in a case like this are 70 to 87 months. That's about 6 to 7 years. Subramanian then said that he saw no reason to depart from those sentencing guidelines. This was at like 10 o'clock this morning. Subramanian said that. He said, well, I've been looking over what the precedent says for sentencing in a case like this, and it says that it should be 70 months or so. And I got to tell you, I don't see any reason to disagree with. So early at 10 o'clock, we're like, holy fuck, this guy is putting Diddy in prison for a while. And by the way, prison is different than where he was. I think he's been in county. He's been in like some holding thing, awaiting trial. He's going to be sentenced to actual prison now for like 4 years. The prosecution had argued for a harsher sentence of more than 11 years, while the defense is requesting only 14 months. That he's already served 12, which would be subtracted from whatever his final punishment is. His kids got up and spoke today. Chance Combs, his eldest daughter, she got up, very tearful, very emotional, at least as far as the people in the courtroom suggested. She told the judge that while her father has been incarcerated, that she personally has seen major changes in him. Feelings that she says, quote, seem real and lasting. She went on to say, when we talk, he speaks with a clear mind and a sense of purpose that I didn't always hear before. That is testimony today from Chance Combs, Diddy's eldest daughter. Then the defense got up and they did, this is so awkward and so cringy. But the defense got up after the kids talked about their dad. The defense got up and went, Your Honor, we have an 11-minute video that we'd like to show you. And then because it's Diddy and it's Bad Boy and everything is like awesome, they made like an 11-minute documentary about how fucking awesome Diddy is. And they made everybody watch it. 11 minutes of how awesome Diddy is. It says here, Sean Combs' legal team is showing an 11-minute video that celebrates Mr. Combs as an inspiring figure. Showing clips of him running the New York City Marathon for charity and and his generous actions as a philanthropist. Philanthropist, different. He's a philanthropist and he's a philanderer. Oh, well, he's got all the fills covered. It includes segments from throughout Mr. Combs' life and career, including scenes of him mourning Kim Porter, the mother of his 4 children, who died in 2018. The video resembles a documentary or perhaps a slickly produced campaign ad. Yeah, and he's got the money to make a really good one. They probably spent millions. Probably find out it was directed by Tim Burton or something like that. Finally, the defense got up today. And like I said, this was a whole day long thing where they were all trying to convince the judge and the defense. They got up and they made their final statements, and it was all about drugs. Defense attorney Sean Combs' defense is linking his violent behavior to long-term addiction to painkillers. It's always painkillers. It's always painkillers, and it's always caused by like some kind of a knee injury or back injury. You never get up in court and go, he likes drugs, Your Honor. He likes drugs. He likes pills. He likes the effects of painkillers. What's that, Judge? Yeah, no, he's never had surgery or anything. As a matter of fact, he's never had a broken bone. He just likes to get fucking high. He just takes pills. No, it's always, It's always they've been victimized by the medical process in this country that gets us all hooked on opioids. Sean's defense is linking his violent to long-term addiction to painkillers. Brian Steele, he was kind of a clown. He's a good attorney, I guess, because, but he's kind of a clown throughout the course of this case. Brian Steele, one of his lawyers, said the mogul's reliance began with a medical operation in 2000. Always does. You never hear, his reliance on drugs occurred in the back of a limo after the MTV Awards in 1999 when he was with Shakira and Britney Spears. Somebody pulled out a big old bag of heroin and they all started, right? You never hear that. It's always, he injured him. He broke his back trying to lift a car off a puppy that had been. It's always some bullshit story. It's never about, I'm just like drugs. It's never that. Drug use is a big part and a key part of how the government says freak-offs damaged the women involved in the case. Cassie Ventura, who dated Mr. Combs for about a decade, testified that she took opioids to come down from the parties. All right, so he's addicted to painkillers, so he's not making good decisions. The prosecution tried to say that drugs and his use of drugs and pushing drugs on other people is how he controlled women. But that is true. They just mentioned it here. Cassie herself only testified as to taking drugs after the freak-offs. So if the prosecution is trying to say he would get them loaded on drugs and then manipulate them into doing all these things, Cassie herself said, no, I was never high. I was never high when I did it. She did admit that she would need to take drugs afterwards. All right, what else? What else do we have here? So far, it says here, the defense has focused on Sean Combs as someone who is remorseful and has been transformed by living in a federal jail for more than a year. The defense is now returning to their main argument at the trial that freak-offs were voluntary sexual encounters between consenting adults. That I believe 100%. Do I believe Diddy is an asshole? Yes. Do I believe he's probably an arrogant jerk that nobody really wants to be around because he's difficult? Yes. Do I believe that he's a brutal abuser of women? Yes. Yes, I do. Do I believe that he forced any of these people into these freak-offs? No. No, I do not. Mr. Steele said that society's better off it said the jury did not find, let me read this completely. It says Brian Steele, one of his lawyers, is returning to the defense's main argument at trial that freak-offs were voluntary sexual encounters between consenting adults. The jury did not find that those encounters were coerced. And Mr. Steele has said that society is better off if that verdict is recognized. So the very notion that the women were coerced and that they were victims at all and that they were forced into participating in these debauched activities, that was rejected by the jury, as it was rejected by me, as it was rejected by anybody that was watching closely. So Brian Steele is saying, Judge, you got to respect that the jury thought that what the prosecution is trying to claim is coercion and manipulation and kidnapping is bullshit. And that's kind of a good point. So today ended with Diddy actually speaking. And let me tell you, from the very beginning, Diddy's such a you can't fix this guy. This guy is never going to be okay. The very first thing that Diddy says is he gets up and he says to the judge, I would like to thank the court for finally affording me an opportunity to speak on my behalf. The suggestion from the outset is pure fucking lie, okay? The suggestion is that Diddy is trying to make it sound like he wasn't allowed to say anything. We all wanted him to testify. He could have testified. At any point during this trial, Diddy could have testified. They chose not to put him on the stand. So now here he is. Your Honor, I just want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to finally say what I want. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you. That's a bad start. Bad start. Sean Combs opened his remarks to the judge by saying, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to finally speak up for myself. Thank you, Judge. You are allowing me this. This trial has been so unfair. You could have talked at any time, Diddy. You chose not to. He goes on to say, one of the hardest things that I've had to handle is having to be quiet not being able to express how sorry I am for my actions. Combs then apologized to his former girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, quote, for any harm or hurt that I've caused her, emotionally or physically. He then went on to apologize to Jane, saying, I brought you into my mess. He also apologized to all the victims of domestic violence, citing the video capturing him beating Miss Ventura in 2016 that was leaked last year. Yes. He said, I want to say sorry to Cassie for any harm or hurt that I've caused you emotionally and physically. And Jane, I brought you into my mess. And I also, if I could, Your Honor, if everybody would just allow me, I want to apologize to every person that has ever been sexually abused. Oh, fuck you. This whole thing from the beginning, it reads like one of the most unsincere, disgenuine. I don't even know if disgenuine's a word. It should be, though, right? Disgenuine? That sounds like it should be a word. He apologized to Jane. He apologized to everybody who's ever been a victim of domestic violence. He called his conduct disgusting, shameful, and sick. His mother and his faith taught him better, he said. I'm not this larger-than-life person. I'm just a human being. Okay. Humility in this moment is probably good. I shouldn't mock him for that. I mean, I would probably mock him if he didn't show some humility. He goes on to say, again, this is Diddy's closing statement to the judge before sentencing. He says, because of my decisions, I lost my freedom. I lost the opportunity to effectively raise my children and be there for my mother. I lost all my businesses. I lost my career. I totally destroyed my reputation. Hey, pal, your rep wasn't that great to begin with. At least not on the street. Normal street people, they all thought you were weird. Combs turned to face his family at this moment and apologized to his children, saying that they deserved better. To his mama, he said, I failed you as a son, and I'm sorry. Yeah, he says that to her as she's drenched in furs and dripping with jewel. You didn't fail. Your mom doesn't think you failed. Your mom thinks you got caught because you're a weird sex perv. But as far as, taking care of mom, you didn't fail, mom. Mom's probably got her own jet. Mom never thought she'd have her own jet. Mom's got her own jet. You didn't fail your mom. You failed yourself. Sean Combs apologized to his community. Oh, here we go. We're going to apologize because right now, suddenly he just represents every person of color in the world. You don't represent people of color. You represent Hollywood. You represent the elite. You haven't been a person of color since you made your first $100 million, dude. Okay? You're Sean Diddy Combs. He apologized to his community for letting y'all down. It's a little racist. Like they're all one community that all hangs out at meetings and they're all let down because all people of color are the same. After seeking to be a shining example of what people of color could accomplish in the business world and beyond, he went on. Okay. I'm a shining example that people of color aren't worse than or aren't incapable of doing what white people. I hate that whole. We know that people of color are just as capable of running successful businesses as anybody else, but here he is trying to act like a martyr for his people. Not going to come out and flatly say that this is the race card, but this is playing the race card adjacent. This is getting a joker and calling it the race card. It's a joker. It can be anything. It's the race card. He said, I ask for your honor for mercy. He's asking for mercy, humility. This is good. This is what she should have done this the whole time. I ask your honor for mercy. I beg your honor for mercy. I ask your honor for a chance to be a father again. I ask your honor for a chance to be a son again. I ask your honor for a chance to be a leader in my community again. No, our community. It's our community, Diddy. You are not. Sean Combs declared that he had, by the way, he has money. He's fine. I mean, he's just not going to be able to be a working or relevant artist in the culture anymore. He was a very significant contributor to American culture of the last 25 years. That has been taken away from him. So he'll just have to deal with that as he sips fancy drinks on his dock at Star Island, Miami. I mean, he'll just have to sit on his $1 billion that I'm sure he still has. Sean Combs declared that he has nobody to blame but himself. Says, I have nobody to blame but myself. But he did ask the judge for another chance, saying that he is willing to comply with any conditions that the court sets. I don't care about the fame or the money or making records or performing. Okay, I can believe you don't care about the fame because you're an older man and you've had a lot of fame, and maybe it's time for you to just sit on the beach and watch other people enjoy fame. So I believe you don't care about the fame. I also believe you don't really care about making records or performing anymore because, again, probably falls under the same sort of thing as fame. But you care about the money, dude. Don't give me that bullshit. You care about the money. All right, Diddy. Well, you don't have to go to jail for 50 months, but when you come out, you'll have like 10 grand in the bank. That's it. You're just going to have 10 grand. That's it. You got to get an apartment. You're going to have to get a car. We're going to liquidate everything. We'll give all the money to all the victims' charities. Because remember, you just said you want to apologize to victims' charities. So let's do that. You don't have to go to jail. Get released today, but we'll give up the money. That's bullshit. He's like, I don't care about the fame or the money or the making of records. He would go to jail for 50 months if it means he can keep the money. If they said you can go to jail or give up all your money, he'd go to jail. Of course he would. It's only 4 years. Besides, that money will come in handy in prison. You know what I mean? Like, you're worried about him. Diddy's got to get his ass kicked. No, he's not. No, he's not going to get his ass kicked. You know why? Because his people are going to be out there writing checks to like gang members and gangsters and big dudes, guys who are important. He's going to be so protected in prison. They're going to pay somebody like, 50 grand a month to make sure that he is surrounded by a team of gangbangers in prison that aren't going to let anybody get to him. So he'll be fine. That's why you need the money. People go to prison with money. That's a thing. You can actually pay for protection. Let's see here. He goes on to say, no matter what anybody says about me, I know that I'm truly sorry for this. Sean Combs said as he concluded his remarks, which lasted about 12 minutes. Okay, so that's it. That brings us up to the entire day. Sean Diddy Combs, trial is over. This will be the final Diddy or Didn't He here on Radio Misfits. He has been sentenced to 50 months in prison. Now, we will less the 12 months that he spent in holding while awaiting trial, but 50 months. I am shocked based on who I was when I went to bed last night, knowing that today was going to be this. I am shocked at 4.2 years. Is that what it is? 48 is 4 years. So, yeah, 4 years and 2 months. I am shocked by that. I don't know. I have no idea. Well, here's the thing. Okay, so I had a lot of fun doing this over the last couple of months. This diving neck deep into some pop culture phenomena that grabs the headlines for a period of time. So please like, follow, subscribe. I do a daily talk show every day. I do a rant, usually at 2 in the afternoon or noon. It depends, Monday through Friday. It's current events, hot topics, trends, whatever it is that people are talking about. I call it talk radio for normal people. Why normal? Because we don't do politics. I'm not MAGA and I'm not a libtard. I'm just like a regular guy trying to talk about the world. So if you're interested in that kind of talk radio, check me out. Like, follow, subscribe right here at Radio Misfits or Pugs and Company. Follow me on Twitter at Pugs Moran or anywhere else at Pugs Moran. And I hope you've enjoyed this little experiment that we've done here over the last few months. Diddy or didn't he? Sean Diddy Combs sentenced to 50 months in prison on 2 charges of basically moving a prostitute from one place to another. I'm Pugs Moran. This has been Diddy or Didn't He on Radio Misfits, radiomisfits.com.